Seek ye knowledge even to China. The saying from the Hadith, traditionally attributed to the Prophet Muhammad, provides guidance to Muslims, encouraging them to travel and learn. Following this advice, it is understandable that the Muslim world might be called the world's first global empire. It connected societies from North Africa to South Asia. Even before missionaries and imperial armies spread Islam around the world, Muslim merchants traveling to non-Muslim lands in search of trading partners were paving the way. In fact, Arab merchants had been traveling to South Asia for centuries before Islam began expanding. Muslim merchants' connections to Dar el-Islam interacted with the developments in sailing technology and environmental knowledge to transform the Indian Ocean into an economic hotspot during the post-classical era. South Asia, with its location in the center of the Indian Ocean, benefited enormously from trade in the Indian Ocean basin. Although some of the causes of expanded trade in the Indian Ocean basin were the same as those of expanded overland routes, some related specifically to ocean travel and knowledge. Although the Indian Ocean trade had existed as early as 200 BCE, the expansion of Islam connected more cities than ever before. Trading partners existed in East Africa, East and Southeast Asia, and South Asia. Muslim, Persians, and Arabs were dominant seafarers and were instrumental in transporting goods to port cities across the Indian Ocean. Cities on the west coast of India, such as Calcutta, became thriving centers of trade due to interactions with merchants from East Africa and Southwest Asia. Calicut especially became a bustling port city for merchants in search of spices from southern India. Foreign merchants from Arabia and China met to exchange goods from both the West and the East. Local rulers welcomed the presence of Muslim and Chinese merchants as it brought the city wealth and prominence. As the Indian Ocean trade grew, so did the demand for specialized products. Every region involved in trade had something special to offer its trading partners. India became known for the high quality of its fabrics, particularly cotton. Also, they had pepper in the southern coastal cities. Modern-day Malaysia and Indonesia became known as the Spice Islands because they exported like nutmeg, cinnamon, cloves. Slaves, ivory, and gold came from the Swahili coastal cities of Mombasa, Mogadishu, and Sofala. China exported silks, and the Chinese porcelain became coveted worldwide. And from Southwest Asia came horses, figs, and dates. Trade and enslaved people also played a role in exchanges in the Indian Ocean. While most Africans who were enslaved and transported to the Americas after 1500 came from West and Central Africa, there had been long-running slave trade in the eastern part of the continent. By routes over land or in the Indian Ocean, slaves from the eastern Africa were sold to buyers in northern Africa, the Middle East, and India. Many were transported to islands off the southeast coast of Africa, such as Madagascar. The trade reached its peak in the 18th and 19th centuries. Enslaved people taken in the Indian Ocean trade suffered fates different from those who were taken across the Atlantic. Slaves in the Indian Ocean trade were more likely to provide forced labor in seaports, in the shipping industry, and as household servants. Some worked as sailors or even soldiers. Living in towns or cities, they had more opportunity to develop communities and to work alongside free laborers than did enslaved people taken to the Americas. Slaves who ended up in Islamic communities had certain rights, such as the right to marry. As a result of the Indian Ocean slave trade, African words, musical styles, and customs can be found in Oman, India, and elsewhere. Knowledge of monsoon winds was essential for trading in the Indian Ocean. In the winter months, winds originated from the northeast, while in the spring and summer they blew from the southwest. Thus, merchants had to time their voyages carefully, often remaining in port cities for months at a time, depending on when favorable winds would come their way. Travelers needed ships capable of navigating the Indian Ocean's winds. Arab sailors used sailing technology to aid their travel. It is debatable whether Arab sailors invented the triangular lateen sails that they used, but the sails were popular because sailors found that the triangle shape could easily catch winds coming from many different directions. Chinese sailors during the classical period had invented the stern rudder, which gave their ships more stability and made them easier to maneuver. The small wooden dhows used by Arab and Indian sailors dominated the seas during the post-classical era. Trade facilitated the rapid spread of sailing technology across the many lands bordering the Indian Ocean. The astrolabe, improved by Muslim navigators in the 12th century, allowed sailors to determine how far north or south they were from the equator. The trading networks in the Indian Ocean fostered the growth of states to help institutionalize the revenue from trade. One Muslim city-state, Malacca, became wealthy by building a navy and imposing fees on ships that passed through the Strait of Malacca, a narrow inlet that many ship captains used to travel between ports in India and ports in China. The Sultan of Malacca became so powerful in the 1400s that he expanded the state into Sumatra and the southern Malay Peninsula. As in city-states in East Africa, Italy, and the Americas, Malacca's prosperity was based on trade rather than agriculture or mining or manufacturing. The Sultanate ended when the Portuguese invaded the city in 1511. The Portuguese hoped that by conquering the key city on the Strait of Malacca, they could control the trade that flowed through it between Europe, India, and China. They were successful enough to generate great wealth for their empire. However, they were less successful than they hoped. Their conquest touched off conflicts among the other states in the region and caused traders and merchants to just diversify their routes and the ports they used. Some of the very factors that caused expansion of exchange networks in the Indian Ocean also in time became effects. Without the arrival of merchants in distant lands, trade could not have expanded. As a natural result of waiting for favorable winds for travels, these merchants interacted with the surrounding cultures and the people of the region. In fact, many Arab and East African merchants stayed in Western Indian port cities permanently because they married women they met there. Arab and Persian merchants settled in East Africa. Thus, these merchants from Dar el-Islam were the first to bring Islam to Southern Asia, not through missionary work or conquest, but through intermarriage. Their children would generally be raised within Muslim traditions. Settlements of people away from their homeland are known as diaspora. In these communities, settlers introduce their own culture traditions into indigenous cultures. Those cultures in turn influence the culture of the merchants. Diasporas arose through trade in many parts of the world. Here's a chart that explains the main trend here. So we're going to see diasporic communities throughout world history for different reasons. Mass movements of people will happen. In the Middle Ages in Europe, we see because of disease, we see this mass movement of people. Black plague breaks out and everybody's like, oh, out of the city, run to the rural areas. But at this time period, we see this mass movement of people because of trade, because of economics. They're moving to move products to different regions and to participate in trade. And as a result, they're settling in these areas. And we get a mass exchange of culture and goods as a result. In a similar way, increased demand for products caused trade to expand. At the same time, however, it resulted in several effects with long-lasting impact. For example, to meet rising demand, producers needed to find ways to become more efficient, to grow more crops, to make more textiles, to manufacture more iron. In some places, the role of the state increased even more to oversee these efforts at efficiency and to raise money through customs, taxes on imported goods, and fees for the use of seaports. The Indian Ocean trade also created thriving city-states along the east coast of Africa, sometimes known as the Swahili city-states. Swahili literally means coasters, and it referred to the inhabitants of the commercial centers such as Kilwa, Mombasa in modern Kenya, and Zanzibar in modern Tanzania. The traders along the Swahili coast sold ivory, gold, slaves to their Arab trading partners, as well as more exotic goods such as tortoise shells, peacock feathers, and rhino horns. In exchange, cities acquired Chinese porcelain, Indian cotton, and manufactured ironwork. Trade was so vigorous along the East Coast that Chinese porcelain remains a common find among the ruins of the Swahili cities. Trade brought considerable wealth to the cities on the eastern African coast. Architecture ruins in Kilwa suggest the wealth and grandeur that once existed there. For example, most buildings had traditionally been constructed of mud and clay. However, at the Indian Ocean's trade height, many mosques and wealthy merchants' homes were made of stone or coral. The transfer of knowledge, culture, technology, commerce, and religion intensified as a result of thriving trade in the Indian Ocean basin. The voyages of the Muslim admiral Zheng Ta reflect this transfer as well as the conflicts it sometimes generated. In 1405, the Ming Dynasty Emperor Yongle sent Zheng Ta on the first of 7 great voyages. Zheng traveled to Indonesia, Ceylon, and other coastal areas along the Indian Ocean, to Arabia and to the east coast of Africa, as well as to the Cape of Good Hope. The main purposes of the voyages were to display the might of the Ming Dynasty to the rest of the world and to receive tribute from the people he encountered. Zheng's fleet was impressive. At its height, his fleet included more than 300 ships that carried 28,000 people. The expeditions won prestige for the Chinese government and opened up new markets for Chinese goods. Zheng Ta and his crew returned to China with exotic treasures, such as the first giraffe the Chinese had ever seen. They also brought back a new understanding of the world beyond China's border. The voyages inspired some to immigrate to ports in Southeast Asia and elsewhere. Zheng Ta's voyages stirred up controversy, though. Confucianism promoted a stable agrarian lifestyle, and scholars worried that greater interaction with trade with foreign cultures threatened China's social order. Some critics simply looked down upon other cultures, deeming them barbaric and vastly inferior to Chinese culture. Some thought the voyages were too expensive. Emperor Yongle's successor, Shu Guiqi, ended Zheng Ta's travels, and he discouraged all Chinese from sailing away from China. To emphasize his point, he made shipbuilding with more than 2 masts a punishable offense. Zheng's voyages did have one positive short-term result. They put a stop to pirate activities off the coast of China's seas. However, after China stopped sending armed merchant ships into the ocean, the pirate activities resumed, especially on the China Sea. As this map shows, there was 3 major exploration movements during this time period. We have Zheng Ta, who's represented by the black arrows, and from China, although he was Islamic, but that was not uncommon during this time period because if you remember, the Yang dynasty was full of Mongols, and so you had a mass movement of people, and so it was an uncommon in China to find a Muslim. So Zheng Ta will of course be represented by the black arrows, and you see his exchange of his culture and how far he went on these things. And then we have Ibn Battuta, who is going to come all the way across from Africa, and he's going to be represented by the purple. He's going to travel all along the Swahili coast. He's going to make it into the Indian Ocean basin, which is right here. And you see his type of, knowledge. There's India right there, along through the Spice Islands and up near China. And then lastly, the European Marco Polo. And of course, he's going to take a land route, but on his way home, he's going to travel through the Indian Ocean basin. So lots of ideas, lots of things, lots of progress during this time period. And they're all being headed by these exploration from major new states rising up during this time period. The expansion of sea routes for trade is like the expansion of the land-based Silk Roads for trade. They are alike in that they both extended global interconnections and depended on new technologies. Yet they also differed. Trade in the Indian Ocean had periods in which it flourished before the spread of Islam, and flourishing trade continued after the spread of Islam. Some changes after the spread of Islam were the high regard afforded Muslim merchants and the expansion of trade routes. And you had also a massive amount of cultural diffusion during this time period.